The crime exposed. The great chamber of the Galaxy Council was filled with voices. Thousands of representatives from different worlds had gathered for what they thought would be another routine session. Reports of trade, border disputes, and political games usually made these meetings dull. But this day was different. This day began with a shadow. On the central screen, a grainy recording played. At first, the image showed only a cargo hold filled with cages. The council members whispered among themselves, confused, bored, until the camera focused. Small figures huddled inside the cages. Their faces were pale, their hands thin, their eyes wide with fear. They were children. Human children. Gasps filled the chamber. Some species shook their heads in disbelief. Others sneered, but many froze, in silence, a cold silence. The slaver captain's voice echoed through the recording. He laughed as he explained the price for these young humans. He mocked their weakness, called them easy to capture, easy to break, perfect for labor and entertainment. Recording ended with a cry, a child no older than 10 screaming for his mother. The chamber erupted. Some shouted for investigation, others for punishment, and a few dared to defend the slavers, saying humans were new to the stars and had no true power. But even as they spoke, fear spread among them. For there was an old memory, buried deep in the history of the galaxy, a warning carried in whispers, ignored by those who thought themselves stronger. Never harm the children of Earth. Many council members had heard it before. Old traders, mercenaries, and explorers had told stories of humans defending their young, with a fury unmatched by any other species. Armies had fallen, empires had crumbled, wars had been started because someone dared to harm human children. And now, the galaxy had repeated that mistake. In one corner of the chamber, an elder from the Valar species whispered to his aide. His voice trembled. He had fought humans long ago before peace treaties had been signed. He remembered their soldiers charging through fire, not for land or riches, but to save civilians, to save their young. This is not war, the elder said. This is the beginning of something worse. The council leader struck the podium to calm the noise, but his voice wavered. He demanded answers. Who had done this? Which syndicate dared to cross the line? A reluctant voice admitted the truth. It was the Zorath slavers, a powerful faction known for cruelty and arrogance. They believed no law could touch them, no army could break them. They had stolen dozens of human children from a colony ship near the outer rim. The chamber fell silent, again. All eyes turned toward the human delegation. The human ambassador stood slowly. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with a quiet fire. He did not shout. He did not beg. His words were simple. You have taken our children, he said, his voice carrying through every speaker, reaching every ear in the galaxy. Do you know what you have done? For a moment, no one breathed. The weight of his words pressed on every soul present. Even those who had mocked humans before now felt unease crawl through their skin. It was not the words themselves that frightened them. It was the way he spoke them. Calm, cold, certain. A young representative from a rival world tried to laugh. He claimed humans were overreacting, that the galaxy had endured slavery for ages, and that it was nothing new. But his laughter died quickly when he saw the human ambassador's gaze. It was not anger. It was something deeper, a promise of judgment. Outside the chamber, the news spread faster than light. Across the galaxy, systems played the footage. Millions saw the cages, the children, the slavers laugh, and billions felt the chill when they heard the human ambassador's words. On human worlds, rage rose like a storm. Mothers wept, fathers clenched fists, soldiers prepared without command. On alien worlds, whispers turned to fear. They remembered how humans fought when their families were threatened. They remembered old wars where humans had turned impossible battles into victories through sheer will. The council tried to call for calm, to form committees, to follow law and order. But it was too late. The spark had been lit. The humans had heard the cry of their children, and the galaxy now waited in dread for their answer. In the slaver's palace, far from the council chamber, The Zorath lords celebrated their capture. They drank. They laughed. They spoke of profit. They had no idea the storm they had awakened. They did not hear the whispers spreading through the stars. They did not know that history itself was turning against them, and above it all, in the silence of the chamber, the human ambassador spoke one final sentence before leaving. "We are coming." The words echoed long after he was gone. The galaxy had witnessed many wars, many uprisings, but never had they seen such calm certainty. They knew then, in their bones, that something unstoppable had been set in motion. Humanity was moving, and nothing would stand in their way. The crime was exposed, the horror was revealed, and the galaxy would soon learn what it truly meant to awaken the wrath of Earth. Echoes of Earth's past. When the council chamber emptied and the recordings spread through the stars, Earth was not silent. On every human world, from the blue, oceans of old Earth to the colonies carved into red dust, the images of the caged children played again and again. It did not matter if one lived in shining cities or far mining outposts. The reaction was the same. Rage. Families gathered in living rooms watching in disbelief. Mothers held their own children closer, unable to breathe as they saw the terror in those young eyes. Fathers clenched their fists until their knuckles bled. In the military academies, cadets stood without command, their faces cold with a promise of war. On streets and in marketplaces, people who had never met shared the same look of fury. No one needed to speak. They all knew what must come. The leaders of Earth tried to appear calm. They met in secret halls, speaking of diplomacy, of pressure, of law. But beneath their words, their hearts carried fire. For this crime was not political. It was not about territory or resources or pride. It was about something deeper, something older. The children of Earth had been stolen, and history itself whispered what that meant. Humanity had faced such horrors before. In ancient times, their young had been taken by empires, by raiders, by tyrants who thought themselves unbreakable. Every time, humanity had risen, broken chains, and burned oppressors to ash. These were not just stories in books. They were scars carved into the very soul of mankind. And now, as the galaxy repeated that sin, those scars began to bleed again. On old Earth, in the shadow of monuments to past wars, veterans gathered. They spoke of Normandy, of Stalingrad, of revolutions where parents had given everything for the future of their children. They reminded the young that humanity had never bowed quietly when its families were threatened. On Mars, a mother who had lost her son to raiders long ago lit a candle at the colony square. Soon hundreds joined her, then thousands. Across colonies, flames rose, not for mourning, but for memory. Each fire was a vow. The slavers had thought humanity would weep and plead. Instead, humanity remembered. They remembered the centuries, when their children had been sent to factories, to mines, to battlefields. They remembered the cost they had paid to end those chains. They remembered that every time the world tried to break them, they had come back stronger. And so, in the silence of space, ships were prepared. They were not the largest fleets in the galaxy. They did not carry the oldest technology. But they were crewed by men and women whose hearts burned with purpose. Soldiers painted symbols of protection on their armor. Pilots whispered names of children before launching. Engineers built not just weapons, but promises. The news reached the alien worlds as well. Some laughed, dismissing humanity as reckless. Others whispered warnings, urging their leaders to keep distance. A few remembered the ancient tales told by their grandfathers, stories of humans who had once fought with fire in their veins, stories of battles where human desperation had turned into unstoppable wrath. Those few trembled, for they knew the Iwizaub stories were not myths. In the great halls of Earth's government, an elder stood before the leaders. His voice was cracked with age, but strong with truth. He told them of a time when children had been taken across oceans, sold as property, and how nations had risen in blood and sacrifice to end it. "We carry that pain in our bones," he said. We cannot forget, and we cannot forgive. Outside, the people already knew. They did not wait for speeches. Across planets, workers left factories to join protests. Miners laid down tools and demanded ships be sent. Teachers paused lessons and told students about the courage of those who fought for them centuries before. Even prisoners in dark cells whispered prayers for vengeance. Humanity had become one voice, one storm, bound by a single truth. The galaxy did not yet understand. They saw humans as young, new to the stars, fragile compared to ancient empires. But those who listened closely could already hear it. The echo of Earth's past rising again, carrying across the void like a war drum. In orbit above Earth, the first fleet of response ships gathered. Their hulls gleamed under the sunlight, but their power came not from steel or engines. It came from the fury of a species that had suffered for generations and had sworn never again. At the center of it all, a simple message was broadcast to the galaxy. It carried no threats, no demands, no diplomacy. It was spoken by a mother whose child had been taken. Her voice was soft, but unshaken. "Bring them back," she said, "or we will come for them." The message ended. Silence followed, but the silence was not peace. It was the silence before a storm the galaxy had never seen before. The echoes of Earth's past had awakened, and soon those echoes would become thunder. The first response. The galaxy had expected speeches, debates, and perhaps a few symbolic strikes from humanity. What they did not expect was the silence that followed Earth's warning. The humans did not argue. They did not beg for votes in the council chamber. They vanished into their fleets and began to move. At first, the alien observers saw little. Patrol ships reported strange disruptions along trade lanes. A cargo vessel belonging to the slaver syndicate disappeared without sending distress signals. Stations along the rim lost contact with convoys. At first, the slavers laughed. They claimed pirates were taking advantage of the chaos. They dismissed the reports as meaningless. But those who looked deeper saw a pattern forming. The routes targeted were not random. They were supply lines, hidden passages, secret networks the slavers used for centuries. Somehow the humans had found them all. The first clear strike came in the shadow of a dead star. A convoy of 10 slaver ships moved through the sector, confident in their escorts. They carried weapons, fuel, and messages of power to their allies. But before they could leave the system, a human fleet dropped from faster than light. It was not a massive fleet. Barely 20 ships faced them. By alien standards, it should have been a slaughter. The battle lasted less than 20 minutes. Human ships did not fight like the council navies. They did not form rigid lines or follow predictable maneuvers. They moved with purpose, with speed, striking like hunters instead of soldiers. They disabled engines, cracked open hulls, and boarded. With terrifying precision, they did not steal cargo. They did not take prisoners unless those prisoners were children. When the smoke cleared, every slaver ship was gone. Only fragments drifted in silence, marked with the red flag of Earth. The survivors who escaped told chilling tales. They spoke of humans who fought like ghosts, their eyes cold, their voices silent. They said the humans did not care for riches or victory. They cared only for the children, and when they found a cage, when they opened it and saw the young inside, they became something unstoppable. Across the galaxy, fear spread. Slaver syndicates began to hide. Planets that once welcomed them closed their gates. Traders who had done business with them suddenly found excuses to cut ties. Even criminal lords who had no love for humanity warned their followers, "Stay away from Earth's fury." But the humans were only beginning. In the halls of Earth's command, leaders spoke little. Orders were given with calm voices. Every fleet was divided into smaller hunting groups, spread across the stars. Each was tasked with one mission: search, find, and rescue. They were not wars of conquest. They did not care about borders or politics. They cared about the stolen children. On one colony near the edge of Zorath space, the slavers prepared to move their captives. They had heard of human raids, and fear began to creep into their arrogance. They tightened defenses, called mercenaries, and prepared for battle. But when the humans came, the defenses meant nothing. They cut through the outer ring like knives through paper. Inside, soldiers moved quietly, each step measured, each breath steady. They did not fire wildly. They did not waste time. They moved, straight toward the cages. When the children saw them, they cried out. Some were too weak to speak, but their eyes lit with hope. The humans carried them out, shielded them with their bodies, and brought them to safety. Behind them, the slavers begged for mercy. None was given. The council watched in shock. They had seen wars before, but never like this. Humanity was not seizing planets. They were not raising flags or demanding tribute. They were cutting out the heart of the slaver network, piece by piece, with terrifying focus. And worse, every victory inspired more humans. Volunteers filled fleets. Civilians turned ships into transports for rescues. Even scientists left their labs to design tools for faster strikes. It was not just an army. It was an entire species moving as one. Among the alien races, fear turned into panic. Old enemies of the slavers whispered alliances with Earth, hoping to escape their wrath. Neutral worlds begged to be left out. Even empires that once mocked humanity began to shift their fleets away from human borders. For they saw the truth. Humanity was not fighting for power. Humanity was fighting for blood, for family. And there was nothing in the galaxy more dangerous than that. In a hidden council meeting, one alien elder spoke what many feared. The humans are not waging war, he said. They are delivering judgment. His words spread like fire, carried from one system to another. Soon, even the bravest captains of the slaver fleets began to desert. Syndicates collapsed without a fight. The few who remained loyal to their trade fortified their last strongholds, unaware that their days were already numbered. Back on Earth, the rescued children were returned to their families. Their faces thin, their eyes hollow but alive. When their mothers embraced them, when their fathers wept, the images were broadcast to every corner of human space. And with those images, the fury only grew stronger. The first response was complete. The slavers had lost ships, fleets, and strongholds. But this was only the beginning. Humanity had made its move, and the galaxy finally understood. They had awakened a storm, and it was only just beginning to gather. Terror among the slavers, the slaver lords had once believed themselves untouchable. They built fortresses on lawless moons, carved palaces inside asteroids, and filled the void with their fleets. For centuries, no empire dared challenge them. They were parasites of the galaxy, feeding on the weak, hiding behind wealth and cruelty. But now their walls trembled. Now the shadow of Earth stretched across every corner of their trade. It began with whispers. A ship disappeared near the outer rim, then another. Crews sent messages of panic, claiming humans boarded their vessels with surgical precision. The survivors spoke of soldiers who fought like shadows, cutting engines before alarms could sound, flooding corridors with silence and steel. Cargo holds were opened, cages shattered, children lifted in human arms. And then the ships were left burning husks, drifting reminders that no one was safe. At first, the lords laughed. They called it rumor, called it fear spreading among cowards. But when the losses grew, their laughter broke. Caravans once guarded by entire fleets vanished into nothing. Palaces fortified with mercenaries fell overnight. Cities that traded in slaves woke to find their leaders missing, their riches gone, their symbols of power burned into ash. The slavers began to fear the night. In one syndicate stronghold, a lord named Cravor paced in his throne room. He had ruled for 50 years, bathing in wealth and cruelty. He had bought and sold lives like trinkets, and no council, no empire, no warlord had ever dared stop him. But tonight, his hands shook. For hours he heard strange sounds, distant, metal groaning, footsteps echoing in halls he thought secure. His guards reported nothing, but their faces were pale. Then the lights failed. When they flickered back on, Cravor's guards were gone. His throne room stood empty except for a mark carved into the wall, a red circle with the Earth sigil at its center. Cravor fled into the tunnels beneath his palace, but he never emerged. Weeks later, his body was found drifting in orbit, sealed, in a broken escape pod. Word spread fast. Humanity was not conquering. Humanity was hunting. The slavers tried to rally. They formed coalitions, combining fleets that had once fought one another. They spent fortunes on mercenaries, weapons, and spies. They sent assassins after human leaders. But every attempt ended the same. Fleets scattered, mercenaries deserted, assassins disappeared. And when spies infiltrated human lines, they returned broken, whispering only one sentence before collapsing, in madness. They do not fight for victory. They fight for their children. The galaxy began to shift. Systems that once tolerated slavers turned against them, fearing that humans would strike anyone who sheltered them. Old allies abandoned, their packs, markets closed, routes collapsed, and in every shadow, in every silence, the slavers saw human eyes watching. On one captured world, children worked in mines under cruel overseers. The night was broken by the sudden roar of engines. Human dropships descended without warning. The overseers called for their guards, but none came. In the tunnels, human soldiers moved like phantoms, their armor black, their rifles steady. They cut down the slavers, broke open the cages, and carried the children out. As dawn rose over the mines, the overseers' bodies hung from steel beams, marked with the words, "Never again." The message was clear. Among the council worlds, panic deepened. The slavers were not just losing wealth, they were vanishing. Entire factions disappeared in days. Leaders who once boasted in chambers were now silent, their seats empty. Some council members argued humanity had gone too far, that vengeance had turned into terror. But even as they spoke, their voices shook, for they knew the truth. This was not chaos. It was precision. Humanity had chosen its targets with purpose, and none could stop them. For the slavers themselves, nights became nightmares. Some abandoned their ships, fleeing into exile on distant moons. Others buried their wealth, hoping to hide until the storm passed. But no hiding place was deep enough. Human fleets appeared in dead systems, on forgotten stations, even inside pirate havens that had stood untouched for centuries. Every strike ended the same way. Children freed, slavers destroyed, silence left behind. The galaxy had seen warlords before. They had seen empires rise and fall, and tyrants crushed. But this was different. This was not war. This was judgment. One alien historian watching the collapse wrote words that echoed across the stars. The slavers awakened an ancient truth. Humanity does not conquer. Humanity protects. And when their children are taken, they do not stop until the universe itself shakes. By the end of the cycle, the slavers no longer trusted their own shadows. They feared the whisper of engines, the flicker of failing lights, the silence of empty corridors. They feared the cold certainty of human wrath. The terror among the slavers was complete. The council realizes the horror. The council chamber, once a theater of pride and politics, had become a hall of dread. Delegates who once laughed at human stubbornness now sat with trembling voices. They had seen the recordings. They had heard the reports. Slaver fortresses were falling not over years or months, but in days. Fleets that once controlled entire sectors were gone, their wreckage drifting in silence. And always at the center of every strike there was the same symbol, painted red against black: Earth. The council leader struck the podium, demanding calm. His voice cracked. "We cannot allow one species to destabilize the order of the galaxy." But even as he spoke, the truth hung heavy in the chamber. This was not destabilization. This was something older, something raw. Humanity was not expanding. They were not conquering. They were cleansing. Reports flooded in from every frontier. A slaver world in the Urok sector had been abandoned overnight after human warships surrounded it without firing a single shot. The slavers fled, leaving wealth, ships, and palaces untouched. They did not fight because they understood fighting would mean annihilation. Another report told of a council envoy who tried to mediate. His ship was intercepted by a human fleet. They let him pass unharmed, but not before delivering a message for the council. The children come home. The guilty do not. The delegates argued among themselves. Some demanded that humanity be sanctioned, that fleets be assembled against them. Others urged caution, reminding the chamber of history. One elder from the Dreth species rose with trembling hands. He had lived through 3 wars. He had seen empires crushed by enemies far weaker on paper. Do not mistake them for reckless, he warned. Do not mistake this for chaos. They move with purpose. They are the storm, and we are standing in its path. Still, pride remained among some. Representatives from species allied to the slavers shouted that humanity was weak, that they could be broken with numbers. But their words were hollow. For everyone in the chamber knew what the galaxy had witnessed. The humans had not unleashed their full strength. They had not mobilized every fleet. What the galaxy had seen so far was only the beginning. Behind closed doors, secret meetings multiplied. Council members whispered of ancient warnings. Traitors had told them centuries ago. Never harm human children. The stories had been dismissed as myths, exaggerations of primitive warriors. But now the myths were alive. Now the warnings walked in steel boots, carrying rifles, burning fleets. And now the council realized the price of ignoring those warnings would be far greater than they imagined. The recordings of human raids were studied in detail. Analysts compared the battles to previous galactic wars. They saw no desire for territory, no hunger for control. Every strike had one goal: the children. If the children were present, the humans became unstoppable. If the children were gone, the humans left without interest. Entire treasure vaults remained untouched. Palaces stood empty but intact. This was not greed. It was justice, pure and unrelenting. One ambassador dared to ask a question in the chamber. His voice echoed through the hall. If they fight like this for dozens of children, what will they do if the galaxy threatens all of them? Silence followed. Not one delegate answered, for the question itself was too heavy. The council sent envoys to Earth, begging for negotiation. They offered reparations. They offered alliances. They offered apologies written in 1,000 languages. But the humans listened with cold eyes. Their answer was the same every time. You touched what should never be touched. You will learn. Across the galaxy, powers began to fracture. Some species rushed to distance themselves from the slavers. They publicly condemned the trade, hoping to shield themselves from human wrath. Others tried to quietly erase records of their dealings, fearing discovery. But the humans had already seen too much. Their intelligence networks were growing. They hunted not only with ships but with knowledge, exposing traitors, revealing secret deals, bringing shame to those who once profited in silence. The council leader convened a final closed session. Every seat was filled. Every delegate looked weary, as though centuries of age had fallen upon them in a single week. We must understand, he said, his voice softer than before, what we have awakened. His words were not met with laughter or debate. They were met with silence and fear. For deep in their hearts, every council member knew the truth. Humanity was not just another species in the stars. Humanity was something different. They were not conquerors, not rulers, not builders of vast empires. They were protectors who had been pushed beyond their limit. The council realized then what horror had been unleashed. The humans would not stop until every child was safe. And when that mission ended, the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. The memory of this judgment would outlast fleets, empires, and even the council itself. They had thought the humans weak. They had thought them fragile. But in that chamber, as silence spread like a shadow, the galaxy understood. They had enslaved the children of Earth, and now the galaxy itself would pay the price. The final reckoning. The last stronghold of the slavers sat on a blackened moon, hidden deep within the scarred edges of the galaxy. For centuries it had been their fortress, their crown, the place where stolen lives were catalogued, broken, and sold like commodities. Its walls were thick with iron and shielded by fleets of warships. Its towers stretched like claws into the void, daring any enemy to try. It was the pride of the Zorath Syndicate and the final bastion of their rule. Yet within those walls, fear had taken root. The lords who once feasted now whispered in secret, their voices cracked by terror. They had seen the fall of every outpost, every fleet, every ally. They knew the storm was coming, and then it came. The silence of space shattered as human warships descended. They did not arrive with ceremony or warning. They dropped from faster than light like knives drawn from darkness. The slavers' sensors screamed, alarms blared, but it was already too late. Human ships formed a circle around the moon, their engines burning like watchful eyes. Every escape route was closed. Every hidden gate was sealed. The fortress was a cage, and humanity held the key. Inside the stronghold, slaver commanders shouted for their fleets to engage. Their ships surged forward, thousands of them, the largest force the Syndicate had ever assembled. They believed numbers could drown human resolve. But numbers meant nothing against fury. The battle that followed was not fought like wars of old. Humans struck with precision, disabling engines, cutting power, cracking open the armor of ships as though tearing paper. Where the slavers hurled chaos, the humans moved with purpose. Where the slavers screamed in arrogance, the humans answered in silence. One by one, the slaver ships fell. Fires painted the void red. Escape pods scattered, only to be captured or destroyed. The moon's shield flickered, then failed. The fortress was exposed. Human dropships rained down like judgment. On the ground, the fight was swift. Human soldiers advanced through corridors heavy with shadows. They did not pause for treasure, did not stop for wealth. They moved through the stronghold like storm winds, every strike calculated, every step steady. Their eyes searched for one thing: the children. Deep within the fortress, in chambers filled with cages, the children huddled. Some were silent, too broken to cry. Others clutched each other, whispering names of parents they thought they would never see again. The slavers guarding them trembled as the echoes of battle grew closer. And then the doors broke open. Human soldiers flooded in. For a moment, silence hung in the room. The children stared with wide, hollow eyes, afraid to believe. Then a soldier knelt, removed his helmet, and smiled. "You are safe now," he said. The words broke the silence. The children wept, voices rising like a tide of hope. Soldiers lifted them, carried them out, and shielded them as though they were carrying the heart of Earth itself. Elsewhere in the fortress, the slaver lords made their last stand. Surrounded in their throne hall, they shouted promises, bargains, desperate offers of riches. They begged for mercy, swore they would abandon the trade forever, pleaded for their lives. But the humans stood unmoved. Their leader, a woman whose own niece had been taken, stepped forward. Her voice was cold, steady, unshaken. "You stole what cannot be stolen. You broke what must never be broken. There is no bargain." Her soldiers raised their rifles. The lords fell. Outside, the fortress burned. Flames clawed at the towers. Smoke filled the sky, and the screams of the guilty faded into silence. The children were carried to waiting ships, given food, blankets, and arms that held them close. Across human space, families watched as broadcasts showed the rescues. Mothers wept, fathers shouted with pride. Whole worlds stood in unity, their hearts bound by the sight of innocence restored. But when the last child was safe, humanity did not cheer. There were no parades, no songs, no celebrations. The soldiers stood in silence, their eyes heavy. They had won, but the cost was carved deep in their souls. They had seen what was done to their children. They had felt the weight of cages, the sound of screams, the scars of cruelty. This was not victory. This was justice. The galaxy watched in awe. Empires that once mocked humanity now trembled at the sight of them. Species that once thought themselves above Earth now bowed their heads. And in the council chamber, no delegate dared speak against them. The silence was absolute, broken only by the memory of words that still echoed through the stars. You touched what should never be touched. On the steps of Earth's capital, the human ambassador spoke once more. His voice was calm, but the fire in his eyes burned for all to see. This is your only lesson. If you ever again enslave our children, if you ever again harm the innocent of Earth, there will be no fortress, no fleet, no world strong enough to protect you. We will come. We will end you, and the galaxy will remember. The words spread, faster than light. Every corner of the galaxy heard them. Every slaver that survived heard them in their dreams, and even those who had no part in the crime felt the weight of the warning. Humanity had shown its true face. They were not conquerors, not tyrants, not rulers. They were protectors, and when their children were stolen, they became something far more terrifying than war. The fortress burned to ashes. The children returned to their families. The stars fell silent once more. But the silence was different now. It was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of fear, the silence of respect, the silence of a galaxy that had learned the cost of awakening Earth's wrath. The final reckoning was complete.